Hello everyone and welcome for another video of Love and Wargames. In this video we will take a deep look at the new Alliance OrBat 3.02. This was an OrBat that the Alliance had been waiting for a long time, and now they had a lot of rules changes, point rebalance, new weapons, new capacities, new ships, a lot of different things. Very lovely OrBat, and the Alliance went from being a very weak faction, probably one of the worst factions in the game in competitive ranking, even though they had beautiful models and very fun rules. But now they not only have all of this, but they are now quite good, quite good. We had a little chat, and they're probably in the top 3 or 4 of the best factions in the game now. So let's have a look at what changed and why they are so good now. This is going to be a deep dive, so buckle up, it's gonna take a while. And also, if you are a new player, there might be some terms you don't understand. First of all, we have a how to play video, so have a look at this if you don't know how to play yet, because otherwise it might be a bit esoteric what we talk about. And also, if you want to start the Alliance, we do have a few what to build options. Some of the older ones with the Magenta Battlefleet or the Oriflamme Battlefleet. However, we have a new one coming with the Alliance starter set, what to build. Yeah, so if you are a new player, have a look for that, and that's going to be very helpful. Now, regardless of how experienced a player you are, let's have a look at the Alliance OrBat. I will mostly focus on what is new, but we'll take a look at every unit one after the other and have a deep look at this. So now let's have a look at the Alliance special rules. First of all, we see ablative flank armor, and this has changed. The flank armor, like the ablative armor in general, has changed for every faction, not only for the Alliance, and it used to be very strong against some specific weapons with low support values and a lot of weapons, and sometimes it didn't help at all. Now it is useful on general. What it does is basically on every weapon, except a few exceptions we'll talk about, you can prevent explosives dice from rolling additional dices, depending on your mass. If you are mass 3 and the enemy makes 4 explosive hits, you will only roll 1 because you are mass 3, so you remove 3 of them. They stay as explosives, you just don't roll additional dices. That is a very efficient rule. We play tested it already with the Commonwealth, which have a little bit more ablative armor everywhere. It is still very powerful. Actually, it is sometimes annoying, but it does not frustrate certain build options. The Alliance has it on quite a few ships on the flank, which is good because usually it's on ships that have a front and a rear turret, so it even encourages you a bit further to do what you already wanted to do, which was to present your flank to the opponent to maximize your firepower and also gain some defensive bonuses. Now, another rule that has changed, and this one has changed a lot, it's coordinated support. Now, before it used to be a defensive rule that increased your defensive stats. I will not explain it again because it's not there anymore, but it was a defensive rule, and now it is an offensive rule mostly. It means, and this is a little bit tricky, it means that when you lead an action dice, like if you shoot with one weapon, other weapons can support even if they don't have the same keywords. So it allows you to bypass this rule that says only weapons with the same keywords can link together. This says like, no, whatever. As long as the weapon has the range, and this is an important point, you will not be able to shoot a hit lancet at extreme range if you have, for example, magnetic bombard and a hit lancet. As long as the weapon has the range, and the angle of fire, of course, it can support, no matter the keywords. This is quite important, for example, especially on friendships, because they usually have quite a few different weapons that were very bad at linking together, and this allowed us to say, like before, well, we don't know what this ship wants to do. It has a few torpedoes, few gun batteries, a hit lance, like what does it want to do? And now you can, for example, lead with your hit lance, which has devastating and hazardous, very good weapon, and then you can support with gun batteries that are usually quite bad, and even torpedoes that would sometimes do nothing if you don't link. So it allows you to pile up a lot of support dices that keep the keywords of the lead weapon, for example, devastating in case of a heat lance, randomly putting that here, and it allows you to have a lot more dices. However, to nerf this a little bit and prevent it from being basically a broken rule, you only use the crippled value of the weapons that are supporting without the correct keyword. So you usually get usually 2 extra dice, sometimes 3, for each weapon that can link. But it's better than nothing, and it allows you to make just one big devastating attack. We tried this with some escorts and attached units and stuff. We had one Oriflamme, special variant that we will see soon, doing something like 55 hits in a single action die. Like, this can really be very powerful. Do not underestimate this rule. It allows you to really punch very hard. Now, there is also still 4 Valor, which is also can be very useful if you roll good. Basically, when you do a Valor effect, or when you try to do a Valor effect and you cancel, you roll a die. If you make an explosive hit, you do not discard the card, you keep it. This can be very good, for example, for very important cards. For example, a full reroll. You use the full reroll, you throw a dice, explosive, you take the card back, and you can use it again. Very convenient rule, very powerful. However, do note that you cannot use this 4 Valor in case you are countering. Your opponent uses a card, you use Fortunes of War, Devil's on Luck. You cannot keep the card that you spent to counterspell the enemy, so to speak. Then there is Heavy Firepower. Still the same as always. On the bigger ships that have this rule, you can use a Valor effect to link 3 weapons at the full lead value. However, now, and something that was a little bit like we were wondering, you do this before you declare your initial target, which means if, for example, you have railguns or weapons that really want to link, and you say, I will link everything on this as one big attack, your opponent counters it with the Fortunes of War, for example, you can say, okay, well, then I cannot do what I wanted, so I will point at another target. So good to know that if you get countered, you can re-point your weapon. Then you get the Malinois Strike Fighters. More convenient rule than you think. Some people sometimes underestimate it. It means, first of all, something basic. Your SRS token have Piercing and Hazardous. Always nice to have an extra Hazardous on your list. And also, they can scramble up to 10 inches, which means if they were in defensive position, they can go on any ship at 10 inches to help defend or to actually make an attack if you don't use them before. Or it means that if you target an enemy ship and this enemy ship is sunk while it has some Malinois Strike Fighters around him, you can scramble them and go to attack another ship at 10 inches. Basically, if you don't have this rule, it's 5 inches, and that makes a huge difference. 5 inches is basically coherency range, and it's quite short range. 10 inches is point blank, and it's a bubble, so it basically means unless you attack a target that is very isolated, you will always be able to scramble on another ship, enemy ship around. And it also means you can play very defensively with them, put your Malinois Strike Fighters on your cruisers that are going to want to be at point blank anyway, and when they reach point blank, you will have this pool of Strike Fighters that can just go and attack enemy ships around. So very good rule, don't underestimate it. Then you have Reinforced Waterline. And this means that attacks with submerged quality, not only torpedoes, everything with submerged counts every heavy hit, so 2 hits usually, as a single hit. That is good, and actually it can really help to protect yourself from, well, mostly torpedoes, but basically any attack with submerged quality. And it makes the French ships, who usually have this, surprisingly resilient against torpedoes. They already have good SDV values, they have good ways to improve their SDV values, and they have this, it can really make them tanky. And Levant ships also got a special rule, a bit different, but that is basically the same, which is very, very good, and it means that French ships deal very well with torpedoes. And that's it. Good that they nerfed a little bit coordinated support, or more like they made it another rule, because otherwise you just wouldn't shoot torpedoes at a French otherwise. But even now, it is a risky proposition to shoot torpedoes at French, because they have fair chance to just intercept everything. Now let's have a look at the Battlefleets themselves. Nothing too crazy here. We already know like this new presentation of the Battlefleets. The command override bonus is still the same. One thing specific that had some questions on the Discord, it is in the force that you can gain this command override, which means if you have a support battlefleet and a frontline battlefleet, your frontline battlefleet can use this command override that the support battlefleet gives. It's the whole fleet that gains the bonus and can get a reroll, not only the fleet that actually has the command override capacity. Same thing for the Valorous Conduct, by the way, which also allows you to gain a bonus, basically using a Valor effect with an initiative value of 50, which is huge. It makes it much harder to counter, and it's the same. If you have a fleet that produces this bonus, but you want to use it on a ship that is outside of this battle fleet, no problem. It's your whole fleet that gains this bonus. Do notice that Valorous Conduct is once per round, and Command Override is once per battle, so be careful not to use it at the right moment. Strategic reserves means that when you roll for emerging from reserve, you can count any hit as being a heavy hit, which means on turn 1 it doesn't help you, but on turn 2, if you don't succeed in making, for example, an explosive hit, which would allow you to come from any table board, any side of the board, this will allow you to still come from your side of the board or on the sides. But at least it guarantees you that your units that are in reserve will be able to arrive at least on turn 2, which is very important, and it really helps to protect your units that would be very vulnerable or slow on turn 1, and to make sure they arrive pretty much where they want to be on turn 2. And then the latest but not least is a Saber Rattle, which is for the Italian ships, and it's a little bit like Shadowhunter. It happens before Shadowhunter or Vanguard moves, but it allows you for units in this battle fleet to be redeployed anywhere as long as they get closer to an enemy unit. And you can only be redeployed once, and you need to stay in your deployment area. So it's not as strong as Shadowhunter because you still have to be careful with it, but it's basically Shadowhunter, especially if you deploy way in the back of your deployment area. You will be able to anyway get closer to an enemy unit even just by moving forward, and so you can kind of like either hide or be a little bit more offensive depending on how you deploy. It doesn't say you need to get closer to the nearest enemy unit. You can, for example, be on the left flank at I don't know, 45 inches from an enemy. You can go on the right flank at 42 inches of the enemy, so you will be much further from the closest enemy that you used to be. However, you will be closer to any enemy unit, so it works, and it is basically Shadowhunter. Just be careful because there is this little restriction, but it is very, very efficient still, and a very good tool for the Italians. Let's now have a look at the different battle fleets that you can build. We'll not go too much in details, because this is something that I will let you read about what is good or bad. Like, the bonuses are not game-changing, basically, most of them. Except, for example, for the Alliance faction battle fleet, which is the first one. You can have any Alliance flagship. You can take quite a few of different units, including 2 Skimming units, which is rare. Only the Alliance faction battle fleet has this bonus. And basically, if this fleet is your second battle fleet, and not the first, not third, not fourth, if it is your second battle fleet, it may choose to take strategic reserve bonus, which means they all go in reserve, and they all can arrive at latest on turn 2. Very good, especially on fragile ships. We are thinking of the French Levant ships, especially, but it can also very much well work with other ships, especially ships that have heat lances, for example, even surface French ships, or Sousa ships that want to get close to the enemy to give them their big broadside. Like, everything can work. You also have the French frontline battle fleet. So you need a French surface flagship, for example, the Oriflamme, or the Levant type Magenta flagship, or the Couronne flagship, which probably will be a surface carrier, we hope. We really cannot wait to have a look at it. You can include multiple Chevalier or Écuyer. Écuyer is an important one. And you basically gain Command Override, which is the big reroll, which can really help when you make this one single big attack with all your weapons linking and you roll very cold. This allows you to make sure that this goes through. You can have some mercenaries, nothing shocking here. you can also have the French Levant battle fleet, and something very interesting here is that the bonus of this battle fleet is that it also can choose to take the strategic reserve battle fleet bonus if it is the second battle fleet in the force. So it kind of like the same as the Alliance faction battle fleet, except this is specifically for French Levant, which can be very powerful because you can include a lot more skimming. It has to be a Magenta or Saint-Michel or Vauban that leads this. The Vauban is not released yet, but you can include 4 skimming units instead of just 2. So when you will start to have quite a few Levant in your fleet, and you will have some support cruisers, some Levant destroyers, you will want a chasseur, maybe a furieux to be attached, this kind of thing, you can just make one big pack of Levant that will just arrive on the side and just slaughter everything. And also one submerged unit, because the submerged French units come with the Magenta battle fleet, so if you buy this battle fleet you want to have a way to include them. And it's quite good because the Épaulards are good as long range, but especially the Sirène, which are the heat lancet submarines, want also to come with strategic reserves. So very good package there. Then we have the Italian frontline battle fleet. This one allows you to include a Mars. We had a spoiler, we'll see at the end, of what it will look like. It's a very good ship. Or the Mercury. Mercury, I don't know yet what it's going to be. Maybe a battleship, probably, maybe a bigger Mars, we will see. And this Italian frontline battle fleet allows you to have Saber Rattle. So it's very good because you have a lot of tough ships. So your enemy will have to deploy accordingly to try to counter them, and it allows you with this like weaker Shadow Hunter to, for example, go on another side and try to trick the enemy. Plus, the Italians want to get closer to the enemy as fast as possible because they have all of them frontal pro ram, so they are tough. They are very good at just ramming the enemy, like smashing into them, and yeah, good bonus for them. And the Italian support battle fleet, it allows you to have a Minerva, which we know is the aircraft carrier, or an Apollo. We don't know yet if it's going to be a bigger carrier or big repair ships, we don't know. And the bonus is Valorous Conduct, which allows you to play a card at Valor 50. And yeah, Minerva doesn't really want it, but remember that you can use Valorous Conduct for heavy firepower, for example, on any ship of your fleet as a whole. And yeah, we don't know much yet, but we will see later about Italians. And finally, the Sousa battle fleet, the South American one, which you have to have a Columbia or Virginia class. We know what they are. They are like the old Confederate of the United States ships. Or you need to have a Salvador class, which I hope will be like a real South American ship. We'll see. You gain from this bonus not much, but you can include a French or Italian ship that gains the Sousa trait, and it gains Rebel Yell and conscripted crew, which is fine. But the main interest of a Sousa fleet is that you have these very tough Union ships that can take heat lances and they can get coordinated support, so that is quite big for them. And plus you can have a little French or Italian ship, depending on what you want. Probably a French you will want, because Italians do kind of the same job as the South Americans, but we will see. That's it for the battle fleet. Let's have a look at the flagships. Oh no, what am I saying? What am I saying? First we have a look at the weapons and everything. The Rostratum Naval Ballista is found on a single Italian ship, which is the ballista ship, basically, and it allows, if you make at least 1 point of damage, which you will usually do, it allows you to try to trigger a valor effect, which can be counter, let's remember. Then the target gets a point of disorder, first of all, always good, and then you can point it to face any direction, so it stays on its place, but you can just point it so it shows you its rear, for example, or you can point it towards an island, or really it's a very powerful thing in this game, which is basically about movement, to just be able to say like, you just go this direction, and then your opponent has to deal with that. Except if they have paddle wheels, such as Union or Chinese, then they don't really care, but otherwise it's going to be extremely annoying for your opponent. Then a few generators, all of them, or we know them for a while. One thing that is interesting, the atomic generator had a little boost. It still gives +2 to the speed limit, but it also gives +2 to the turn limit, which allows you on some units to make some hard turns, so became better, way better. Fury is the same. Magnetic it goes back to enemy attacks with aerial quality. Notice aerial quality or enemy SRS as always. Now count hits, heavy hits as single hits. So that is good. Also, what you can give a disorder token on an enemy aerial ship within 10 inches, which is also very good. You do get to use this quite often because there are more and more aerial units coming onto the game. And yeah, you also can try to roll dices, like explosive hits. It's basically a flag barrage that is as strong as the number of SRS token that there is around. So that all of this is good. Like the magnetic is really the anti-aircraft, anti-aerial generator, and it does shape up to be one of the best defensive generator that there can be. Of course, if your opponent doesn't have any SRS token, it's a bit underwhelming. But if he does have, and most fleets try to have at least a few carriers, and some of the carriers are very good, the magnetic can really save your day. Like it's basically a flag barrage. You get to reduce the firepower of your opponent. You can give disorders around, like very good. Then you have the repulsion field generator, which gives you even more SDV if you have it. Let's remember that the Alliance has good defensive capabilities already against torpedoes. And it allows you to move over terrain and other ships without collisions, which is fine. But at the end of your movement, you need to not be on a terrain or not be on a ship, etc. Otherwise, it causes a collision, or it just destroys you if you are on terrain. So be careful about that. But it can be good. I'm not sure that I would really want to include this on all of my ships, except if you have a very, very specific plan. But good that the Alliance has it. You also have the shield generator, still good, old, reliable. However, the shield generator's got a quite potent nerf in that if you use a shield generator, you cannot count as being obscured, no matter the source. No matter the source, if you had a shroud generator or you hide it a little bit behind another ship or behind an island, nope, you don't count as being obscured. So that is a hard nerf for the shield generators, which used to be my favorite. But now I'm like, wow, if I have to choose, like, probably I will choose to be obscured, and then my shield generator is of no use. Shield generators are still gonna be very efficient on smaller dice pools. If your enemy has like 10 dices or 12 dices, possibly with the devastating, it's good to reduce it by 2 or 3. Especially by 3. But if you start to see like 15 or 20 dices or more going your way, you will always want to take shrouds. Statistically, it's just better. So yeah, shield generators are basically the anti-small attack generators now. But it's a hard nerf, and you really need to think hard which generators you want. If you want the shield generator or the shroud. Shroud, you probably want to take it instead. It basically means that for all the attacks, except boarding and SRS tokens, you count as being obscured. Do note that even ramming actions count as being obscured, which is huge, especially when there are more and more ships that can use unexpected arrival to just pop up next to you and use their ramming action. So Shroud, very good. And finally, you have Solex generators for the Alliance, which gives basically sustained to your heat lances, your heat lancets, and the thermal bombs that can be seen on the larger Levant ships. That is already good, already very good, especially now with coordinated support that you can just pile more and more dices on a single attack. Getting sustain is huge. And also, as a valor effect, which can be countered once again, you can shoot with 360 degrees line of sight heat lancets, which allows you to gain even more firepower if you would so desire. Heat lancet in support, I'm not sure it's that amazing. It's like 4 dices, 3 dices. I'm not sure you want a valor effect for that, except if you really absolutely need to finish off someone. But yeah, or if there is an enemy in your rear you cannot target and you want to give them a single heat lancet, which always is painful. And now, the values of the weapons. We will not spend too much time on this, because it will make the video too long, and it's gonna be long already. Just notice that the ramming now degrades when you are crippled, and this is especially important because all the factions with unexpected arrival, when they say like, yeah, you emerge from an unexpected arrival and you use your ramming action and your shooting action, for example. The shooting action already said you shoot at crippled value when you come out from unexpected arrival. Now your ramming action also uses the crippled value. So that is a big change. It's not that bad. You see, for example, heavy program goes from 10 to 8, program goes from 6 to 5, so it's not that important, especially on alliance ships which don't have a lot of access to unexpected arrival. But for other factions, it's very good. And in the for like uniformity, of course, the alliance also has this. Do notice that there has been a significant boost of the gun batteries, which used to be 5.2 in their battle ready value and 4.1 in their cripple value, and it went to 5.3 and 4.2, which means the gun batteries support much better. That is especially important if you remember with coordinated support, because it basically doubles the amount of dices that you would get from supporting with coordinated support with the gun batteries. And since a lot of French ship and alliance ship in general have gun batteries, this is a very good boost for them. Not only for the alliance, again, all the factions with gun batteries got that, but the alliance especially likes it with coordinated support. And finally, we go to the nitty-gritty of the OrBat, the ships. We'll have a look at all of them. And yeah, it might take a little bit of time, but I hope you enjoy. You can paint as you listened, or like yeah, just imagine how you will build your fleets. First thing, and one ship that has been announced for February 2023, so you can order it very soon, is the Columbia Heavy Battleship, a Confederate ship that now belongs to the South American Union. The Union itself, of course, can also still take it. And this is a tough ship. I mean, just look at the stat line. This thing has armor 8, okay, Citadel 17. that is, I don't think anybody has a higher Citadel value. It has 10 hull points before it goes to crippled, and it costs only, okay, quotation marks, only 275 points, which might sound like a lot, but like for the value, it will go to the center of the board and just not die. You have two front heavy gun batteries. You also have a small rocket battery that can support, and in the rear you have another heavy gun battery and a rocket battery. There are two ways I would see this, how to play this. First of all, as a rear, like kind of like in the middle of your battle fleet, really battleship that will go pointing the enemy and that will show its flank to the enemy, because then you can just point all your weapons. So 3 heavy gun batteries with heavy firepower. Of course, you will want to put heavy firepower, supported by 2 rocket batteries. It will give another extra 4 dices depending on the range, and then you can just pile up and do a lot of damage. This is the first way of playing this. Or you can remove the rear heavy gun battery, put, for example, a shield, or even better, a shroud generator, like if you want to be a little bit tricky, and then this thing is just not gonna die. Like armor 8, Citadel 17, 10 hull points, and shrouded. I mean, it is going to absorb a lot of firepower, and this is what you want. You want it to be tanky. By the way, yeah, I would recommend taking the 4 escort tokens, 32 points in total if you take the 4 of those, but it's gonna improve the SDV and ADV by +4, making it remarkably tanky. And we'll see a little bit further in the OrBat, but the Sousa have very good escort units in the form of the Springfield corvettes, which can bring its ADV and SDV and boarding capacity, etc., to like insane level, and you can really make this the centerpiece of your fleet that will tank the enemy firepower, especially if you take 4 escorts and 4 corvettes, which you absolutely can in the rules. And now this thing is unkillable. It might not be that offensive with this configuration. It's gonna cost like almost 400 points. Yeah, 405 points, but it is going to just go to the center. It cannot be ignored because it starts to be a lot of firepower, especially at point blank range, even with the heavy broadside, and yeah, it's very efficient, and it will hold. It will hold no matter what. And if your enemy sinks it, it will take him like 3 turns to sink the Columbia, and then the rest of your fleet can do whatever it wants. Let's take this opportunity to have a look at the specific rules for the Susa ships. We'll not talk about them again, but they have two specific rules. Conscripted crew, which means they are very bad in assault, either attacking or defending. On the assault, they count heavy hits as single hits, which means they don't want to board or be boarded, which is a bit sad because this Columbia has fray value of 14, so it could want, especially with 4 escorts and 4 Springfields. But yeah, even with this little rule, it will still be very good in boarding if you start to pile up all these dices. But still, something to take into consideration. And something that is even naughtier, Rebel Yell, it means that crippled model will still use the battle ready value of their weapon, except if you get disorder red or black, so emergency or chaos of disarray, which can happen fast, especially if you get crippled. But if you do manage to repair your ship good enough, it means that the opponent really has to sink the Columbia, otherwise it will just keep shooting at full potency. And it really makes it a very good tanky ship. Like, again, reinforces it in the role of just going to the middle of the board and the enemy has to deal with it all the way until the end. Do know that Rebel Yell also mean that you ignore the nerf of conscripted crew if you make an assault or if you are being boarded by Union ships. So it's cool, it's very fluffy, and yeah, it's very, very just cool and fluffy rule. And it also means that if you have a Union player in your meta, or you might want to get more Susa ships, first of all for the fluff, and second of all because it makes your ship even better. And now we have a look at the magenta, which in our little gaming group in Paris, we tried to make it work so hard for so long and just didn't work. It got a little point bump. It used to be 239 and now it got plus 2 points. But what it got in exchange, first of all, it has access everywhere to strategic reserves, which it so desperately needed. Yeah, because it gets focused down hard. It's quite fragile, and yeah, the enemy know that it's very threatening, so it will focus fire on your ship. Now you can make sure that it survives first turn and does something cool on second turn. And it also got 11 surge, which still means that you can start to fly one turn, once every other turn you can fly, which is very good. And it now means that attack with a submerged quality only count heavy hits as single hits. This is very cool, and unlike the reinforced waterline for the French surface ship, it doesn't get ignored by piercing or anything. Like, you just get this rule all the time, no matter the qualities of your opponent submerged weapons. So very, very good defensive capabilities. And yeah, it was a bit weird that the Levant ships were more vulnerable to torpedoes than the surface ships. We were like, why? Are those flying torpedoes? No. Now, even if the torpedoes explode just beneath the Levant, it will be reduced damaged on the Levant, which makes absolute sense from the fluff point of view, and make these very fragile ships a little bit tougher. Then the configuration of the magenta, as always, you do want heat lances. Probably you now want to remove the heat lance in the rear and give, for example, a Solex generator, and then you just keep a heat lance in the front and you just support with your 3 gun batteries and maybe even a broadside. Who knows? Might not be the worst idea. But yeah, the coordinated support allows you to do a lot of funky things with it. Or of course you can just pile up all the heat lance sets that you want and just have a very expensive ship, but that's not what I would recommend, actually. Now, just one thing before that I want to say is one combo that was not possible before, and it is now, is that you can give the Solex generator to the magenta and attach it another Levant ship, for example a Furieux, the Furieux with some whatever weapons, and the Furieux can support the attack of the magenta because it's an attached unit, and the Furieux doesn't need to have any specific weapons. It can be all with rockets or gun batteries or whatever you want, or it lances, and they can now all link together and gain devastating from the it lance of the magenta, and also sustained from the Solex generator for the magenta, even if the Furieux does not have it. This was a little combo that was not possible before because Solex only gives it to the main ship, the magenta, and you used to not be able to link weapons that don't have the same value, but it now means that the Furieux absolutely can. do you want to do this, or do you want the Fury to have its own hit lances and not use the cripple value? Up to you. But now if you really want to have one big punch on the turn the Magenta arrives, you absolutely can, and this is gonna hurt. And now the Mars that is coming soon. It has not been announced yet, but we have heard that it might come soon. The flagship of the Italians, a very, very tough battleship again. As we said for the Columbia, it has only Citadel 16, or poor guy, and hull 9, so it's a little bit less defensive than the Columbia. It costs only 5 points less. So you might think like, oh, but why? Like, what does it have? First of all, it has ablative flank armor, which is straight up very good. However, it's not as good on this Italian ship as on other Italian ships. Why? Because if it wants to maximize its firepower, so its torpedoes and its 3 heavy gun batteries, it needs to look at the enemy. So it might be a little bit tricky to point, but yeah, it means that if an enemy goes on your flank for your heavy broadside, for example, you will be a little bit tougher. Always good to take. It has Advanced Repair Facility 1, which means not only that it can have more chance to repair itself, but it can also repair ships around it. Convenient, very convenient. So it wants really to be in the middle of your fleet. And it also has the Heavy Pro Ram, and the hammer sweep rule that goes with it, which means that you can point it forward to the enemy ship that you want to ram, and then you can declare at your next activation hammer sweep. You will just go very fast forward. Well, very fast. It's only 9 inches, but still, you will do this. And if you do this between your hull, your heavy pro ram, and the bonus from hammer sweep, you will absolutely devastate anything you try to to ram. So very good ship, kind of like this old style trireme of the Roman Empire in the style of the artwork, as we can see. And it's kind of like how you want to play. You want to really aim for the enemy ship, shoot at it with torpedoes, heavy gun batteries, everything you want. Your flanks are a little bit secure with ablative flank armor, and you have heavy broadsides to keep enemies away. And then you just charge the enemy and just ram them. Looks like a very fun ship to play, but you need to anticipate, especially with the activations, etc., to make sure that sorry, to make sure that you can really succeed in this ramming action. Then the Minerva, also an Italian ship. We don't know what it will look like yet. It is not extremely powerful in terms of firepower, as you can see. It has 3 small rocket batteries, including one that can only have a very weird angle, and that is bad. We've seen it already on the Mojaiski. However, compared to the Mojaiski, it has a small torpedo salvo. It costs the same as the Mojaiski, so you're like, but the Mojaiski was bad for the Russians. What is the difference with their Minerva? Well, first of all, it has ablative flank armor, not great, but it has SRS capacity of 8, fine. It has Advanced Repair Facility 3, which means that this little Minerva will throw 6 dices and for itself, and it can use these 6 repair dices to repair ships all around. That is extremely good. It's one of the best repair ship of the game. Only a few of those, including the Murmansk, for example, have better repair capacities. And yeah, it is relatively tough with 7 armor, 14 citadels. It doesn't degrade that fast for a carrier, actually. 6 hull points in battle ready makes it a tough carrier to cripple. And yeah, it's just a good ship. The Malinois strike fighters are useful, as we've seen before. I'm not sure if it's worth 255 points because like you have other carriers that are very, very good. I'm thinking of the Vauban especially, that is really amazing. But the Minerva is for sure not a bad choice, especially because it has this torpedo that allows it to really stay at extreme range and throw torpedoes, so it's not useless. Well, it's not much, but especially because of these advanced repair facilities. 6 dices, your fleet around will not have that many disorders or critical after that, that's for sure. And we go to the Oriflamme. Oriflamme, such a beautiful ship. I mean, just look at it, it's brilliant. And it was very hard to make it efficient, unfortunately, because it was so fragile. It is still fragile, make no mistake, but it got some very interesting rules. For example, it gained protected gun crew, which means you will still use the battle-ready value for your weapons with the gunnery and broadside quality, unless you are in the black level of disorder. And disorder condition, and it has no effect on the supporting with the coordinate support. Okay, it means that first of all, the enemy will have to sink him, so it cannot just cripple him and say like, okay, it's fine. No, it's not fine, especially if you have a Minerva around for repairing, for example, these disorder tokens. And the coordinate support really helped this ship, because as you can see, its default configuration, it has heat lance in the front, heavy gun batteries in the rear, 2 gun batteries to the front, torpedo turrets to the sides, and it's like, what do you want to do? It used to be that you did a little gun battery attack, a little torpedo attack. It's like, now you can really just make one big pool of everything. One heat lance in the front, maybe probably a Solex in the rear, or you can put a Shroud in the rear as well to make it tougher and try to make it survive, and you can just make one big attack to the front. That is very good. Yeah, even at long range, the heat lance can shoot at long range, and then you can support with the torpedo batteries as well. So could be useful, like much more usable ship now. And it used to want to be with the Écuyère frigates, and the Écuyère also got a buff, so you can really have this big package of the Oriflamme with its one heat lance and all the ships around supporting to make one big attack, and that is very good. Then you have the Saint-Michel. The Oriflamme lost some points. It went from 235 to 230, -5. The Saint-Michel reduced its cost by 10. So it was 258. It is now 248. It used to be so weak. I had my Saint-Michel one shot at one game, and we're like, okay, great. And now it is still fragile, but it gained the defensive bonus of the Levant Surge, which is very good, and it is still very fragile for its point cost. So don't make the mistake that I did. Just remember, don't make it fly in the first turn and keep it really much in the rear behind an island, because it is one of your very few sources of Fortunes of War, which is a very important rule. And you can actually like swap for free the heat lancets on the sides with torpedo turrets, so it can contribute even when you just stay in the back and send your 6 SRS token. But you want it as a source of Fortunes of War. 6 SRS token is fine, and it can throw its torpedo turrets. You might wonder for new players what the heat lance is for. It's basically used so that when your enemy comes rushing at your Saint-Michel, you can run away very fast and still shoot behind you while you're running away. The Saint-Michel is fragile. It's very important. You don't want any enemy to be in closing range, or if it is in closing range, just start to fly away. So you are counting as being in long range. But yeah, it is fragile. You will want to run away at some points, and yeah, when you do, use your heat lance supported by the torpedo turrets, because you can now with coordinate support to just run away and shoot at the enemy. Another way to play it, but this is not very fluffy, so you can put a magnetic bombard now in the rear and put 2 torpedo turrets, and you can point actually the Saint-Michel, you can point its rear to the enemy, and you can shoot in the back and be already ready on the deployment to start to run away. That is not very beautiful on the table. I would not probably recommend it, but it is an option if you really want to win. Now we go to the Vauban Sky Fortress. The Vauban is probably, now that we have the Avalon, probably my most anticipated miniature, because when you look at it, it is just a giant Levant ship, and the Magenta is already one of the most beautiful ships of the game. Fight me. The Chasseur as well, the Furieux, all of them are beautiful. And having a Mass 4 Levant ship, I cannot even imagine what it will look like. I cannot wait for the concept art, and even more for the miniature itself. Plus, it is a good ship. It is 370 points, so very expensive. It is Mass 4. It does not have Fortunes of War. It has Priority Signal, which allows you, when your card for Valor effect gets countered, you can say, okay, well, I throw my first card, but I will use another one. So if you really want to succeed in your Valor effect, remember every time you use a card for a Valor effect, you roll a dice thanks to 4 Valor, and you can try to get it back. So don't forget it. And especially this guy has good SRS capacity. It has 8 in total, but 4 SRS are the Malinois Strike Fighter, and 4 of them are the Frelon bomber. The Frelon is interesting. It has a little bit shorter range, only 30 inches. So yeah, but by turn 2 you will have opponents in reach. And the Frelon are much more fragile. You only need 2 success of interception to destroy them. So be careful with them. You want them to be escorted by Malinois strike fighters, either those of the Vauban himself, good option, or those from other carriers, for example from Minerva or from Saint Michel. And the bombers are very, very efficient. They have sustained, first of all, which is already good. Bomb, very good. You ignore like shields, and there are a few things that are good with this. Hazardous as well. Well, this is all the SRS token for the French. And if you have more Frelon bombers than the mass of the target, so maximum you can aim at mass 3, but if it is mass 3 or less and you manage to protect your bombers good, then you gain devastating. Devastating on a big pile of attacks of SRS aircraft. Like the whole bombing run gains this. So you can really start to have something like, I don't know, like 30 or 35 dices of devastating sustained bomb. Like you will sink the mass 3 that you're pointing at. Like almost for sure. And yeah, the Frelon are just a very good unit. We already seen how efficient the bombers of the Imperium can be, and yeah, that is just as good for the Frelon bombers. Except the Imperium one can be sent a bit further away because it's the Imperium; they have to be stronger. Huh? Otherwise, the Vauban is lumbering, so more sensitive to the gunnery weapons. It has a shield generator. We have seen that it is sometimes not that good as it used to be, but still, let's take it. Like you have it, let's take it. Sometimes you will want to use it. And yeah, just overall a very good weapon, a very good ship. It has 2 frontal heat lances, so wow, and you can support it with the 2 frontal rocket batteries. Again, wow. One thing that will be funny is that they have both of them the same angle of fire, which is port side, and it means that if you show your good angle, which is port side, to the opponent, or actually the starboard as well, like I'm quite curious to see what the what the ship will look like. But front is not your best angle, but if you are either port side or starboard, you will be able to link everything. So 2 heat lances, 4 rocket batteries. Ooh, that's gonna be like battleship level firepower right there. And plus, if you fly over an enemy, you can throw them 2 thermal cluster bombs in the rear. Those are very, very efficient. Plus, like, like it's just like devastating. It basically heat lances level of firepower, these thermal cluster bombs. So just overall, a very good ship, good SRS capacity, relatively tanky. It has only Citadel 13, so don't get too crazy with it. It is quite fast for like a mass 4 ship, especially since it has Levant Surge. Let's remember that it means you can go aerial and gain +3 movement. So if you do that, you're gonna move like 11 inches in your activation. For a mass 4, it is fast with turn 4. I mean, it is a good ship. It is a good ship. We'll see. We'll talk about it more when it gets released, and we'll do a what to build video about it. But for now, a very good ship. And finally, the Virginia class Soul battleship. It's an alternative build for the Columbia. We've seen how efficient the Columbia can be as a tanky ship. This one is a little bit different. It doesn't have the rocket battery in the rear. It doesn't have the heavy gun battery in the rear. But what does it have then? It has 2 very specific and very useful roles. It has Flag Barrage 10, which means that before the SRS token activate, you throw 10 dices, and for every explosive you remove token around. That is very good. It has been specified that you cannot choose, thanks to Flank Barrage, to remove some bombers specifically. You have to remove first the escorts if you have like you don't have the choice, unfortunately. But still, Flag Barrage 10 is very good for such a tough ship that wants to be in the middle. And you also get Terminator Assault, which first of all, if this rule doesn't remind you of another game, I don't know what to tell you, but it's very cool. It means that during the special operation step, so basically the same as you would send some SRS token, you can choose a target 20 inches away, so quite short range, and then you can put Talon autogyros, which are these large helicopters, like think of them as like kind of like osprey carriers that will go to the enemy's ships, and they will make an assault actually, and it's gonna be 5 dices per Gyron token, so that's gonna be for per mass. So there's gonna be 15 dices for the Virginia. Very good. It ignores counter assault, and yeah, and it ignores the conscripted crew rule, which would make it very weak indeed. So yeah, it allows you to make an assault like basically 20 inches away. What is not to like? And 15, it's quite good. Do note that you cannot use a boarding action for the Virginia itself in the same turn as you use this special operation, because that would be too strong. You would do 15 dices of assault, and then you could get closer and do another 14 from the fray. It would be a bit too strong, but it is a very good rule. It puts an even bigger target on your Virginia. But I think that's how I would play it, because it gives you a little bit of utility. It makes it a little bit less resilient, but you still just want to point your front to the enemy, and you can be basically a small carrier sending assaults everywhere. It's basically the same rule for those that know the Covenant. It's basically the same rule as the Physeteer Assault for the Covenant. A little bit less strong, because come on, but still very efficient. And now, that's something very, very cool. I'm very excited. We have 2 named variants for the Oriflamme. Both of them are more expensive because they are better, and you don't get the option to customize them. That is a little bit sad, but you do get a lot of good things. First of all, you have the fish. This one gains focused gunnery, which is already good. It means that you gain +2 to 1 action dice, okay, with a gunnery, good, and you reroll blanks all the time. That is very good, especially when you start to have a lot of rolls. And what another thing that he gets is command code, which means once per round, and I insist once per round, not once per game. You can say like, okay, this unit that did a roll and it was within 15 inches of the fish, it can just re-roll everything. So that is very good. You need to choose this before you start to do your own rerolls and stuff. But it is just very good, and it's not a valor effect or anything. It cannot be intercepted, so just a good reroll that you can just give out turn after turn after turn, as long as the fish is alive. And again, the French and the Alliance in general do like to pull all their dices in a single big attack because of coordinated support, and it allows you for these big dice that you really count on, because you will only have one big roll. You will throw them, and you really want, if you roll very cold, to be able to say like, okay, that's not what I want for my 40 dices of devastating. I'm gonna reroll everything, and the fish allows you to do this every turn as long as it's alive. It has heavy gun batteries a little bit everywhere, and some torpedo turrets left and right. I would keep this configuration as it is of the fish. It seems like you don't have the choice, but it is a good configuration, because it allows you to just stay in the back a little bit and yeah, just shoot as good as you can at the opponent in front of you from quite a distance, because it's more of a support ship than a really devastating ship. And it goes, of course, very good also with some écuyères or with some escorts. It can take 4 escorts. The Richelieu can only take 3 escorts, something to note, and you might be like, oh, why? Because the Richelieu is an absolute beast. I played against it a couple days ago, and yeah, this thing, it packs a punch. It's more expensive, 251 points. It has focused gunnery also, which allows him to reroll blanks and get +2 dices, and it gets all the hit lances it can dream of. It has a hit lance in the front, which, let's remember, the Oriflamme, the basic one, could not have it. So it has hit lance, 2 hit lancets, and the torpedo turrets. That's already one big pull that you will do with coordinated support. And in the rear, it has a Solex generator. Why not? Which means all these dices will be sustained, and they're already devastating as a reminder. So that is a lot to handle. What more can we say about this, except that you can boost this, for example, at point blank, which is where the Richelieu wants to be, with, for example, 3 escorts, which will add you 3 more dices. And you can put écuyères as well, which will, you can put 4 écuyères as an attached unit, and each of them, at closing range, for example, each of them will add 2 dices, so there's going to be an extra 8 dices. All of this sustained, rerolling blanks, devastating. I'm telling you, like, this thing, this Richelieu, without escorts, and not even at point blank, it almost one-shot a Constitution battleship. It did like something like 54 hits at closing range, so I don't even want to think about what it can do at point blank. But yeah, it's just such a good ship. It is fragile, again, very fragile for its point cost. Armor 7, Citadel 14, 7 hulls, and it wants to be at point blank. And it will get focused fired hard. But if you do manage to get it at point blank, either by hiding a little bit, it is resilient if you put all the escort, it is resilient to aerial attacks or torpedoes, etc. Or you can put it, of course, in a strategic reserve, in an alliance faction battle fleet. That might be a good call to do it like this. So a very, very good ship. I expected to take maybe a little point nerf. When it was playtested with a war host, we already said like, okay, it's very strong, make it a little bit more expensive. It did become more expensive, and it is at a fairly good point. It wouldn't be out of place if it was 260 points, for example, but it's such a good ship. Play it. Okay, we see now a little picture of Grand Admiral Rafe Cortes, which is Supreme Naval Commander of the Susa. Maybe we will hear about him soon. Who knows? Who knows? And now we have a look at the main units, not the flagship, but the core units of the Alliance. There are quite a few. We'll not spend as much time as on the flagships, probably. We start with an Italian unit, the Auxilia Fast Cruiser. This one, as the name indicates, is very fast. It has speed 9, mass 2, linear dash, and vanguard, which means that this relatively tough ship, armor 6, Citadel 13, 4 hull before it degrades, this relatively tough ship with a front pro-ram can be worried once by turn 2. I mean, if it goes straight in front of him, it's going to be 13 inches forward if it does linear dash, and it has vanguard, which means it will already move 5 inches before the first turn even begins. It has torpedo salvo because it wants to go forward, pro-ram, and in front it has heavy gun battery, 1 gun battery, and small broadsides. You can start to remove things left and right. Should you? I don't know. I don't think so, actually. I think the basic configuration is good, especially if you start to have 2 or 3 of those. I think 2 Auxilia are the good point, because then you can link and have a good firepower, and you're not as fragile. And it's not that expensive. It's going to be like 184 points, and your enemy will want to deal with it, but it's like, yeah, they're a little bit tough still, and they're not that dangerous, are they? And then you just get at your good range, and you start throwing broadside and ramming, etc., and it's very good. And if the enemy focuses them, well, they're not that expensive, and they're relatively tough, so good for you as well, either way. Then you get the mass 1 for the Italians, which is the Cestus Zebec. This thing is good. Like, it has flag barrage 2 on the mass 1. I mean, what? So it means that if you make a big squadron of 6 of those, okay, not sure you want, but it means you would have flag barrage 12. I mean, this thing, mass 1s usually hate SRS token, especially of the Russian, but basically all the SRS token can kill them very fast. Those don't care about that much, and they have gun batteries with focused gunnery, which means that if you pile all of them at closing range, that is going to be a lot of dices, rerolling blanks. These things are good, and they are relatively cheap at 30 points each. However, they are not that vulnerable to SRS. They are vulnerable to normal attack. They have only 2 hull points. Yeah, that is not much. Armor 5, Citadel 10. So one way or another, if your enemy makes 10 hits on one of them, it is going down. So they're fragile. Because of this, their relative resilience to the SRS token and their potential damage if they get at closing range, I would play them mostly on the flank, so the enemy doesn't have good units to attack them. Let's remember they are Italian, so they have access to Shadow Hunter, which is not Saber Rattle, but you can have some shenanigans in the deployment phase, and try to keep them away from the big hitters, because a single blast and they're dead, basically. And even like a few gun batteries or heavy gun batteries shooting at them and they're gone as well. So put them far away, so the only option for your opponent to intercept them would be to send them some SRS token, which they are resilient against, thanks to flag barrage. Yeah, well, if the enemy ignores it because they are too far, then you can just actually get at closing range and make this big attack with the gun batteries spread out so you don't die so fast. And yeah, that's how I would play them. Next, we have the Charlemagne heavy cruisers, and I am quite happy to say that this Charlemagne, whether it was a beautiful model but was way overcosted and underperforming, now is a real option on the table. What does it get? First of all, it got a little point change. It went, this Charlemagne, from 125 to 130, which means it got more expensive. And then you're like, whoa, whoa, what's going on? That's not what I want. What it got, first of all, it got all the bonuses that we said before, which means it benefits especially from this coordinated support, so it got a lot better in this sense. It got the protected gun crews, which was very important for him as well, because getting him crippled with all his weapon was really bad. And it got a heavy rolling broadside as well, which again is huge. And finally, with all more than all of this, it got a very interesting rule. It got heavy firepower, which means that you can link weapons together at their full value, at their full lead value, and not at the support value. Again, be careful. It does not work with coordinated support, unfortunately. You cannot use this on weapons that are doing the coordinated support. But it does mean that, especially for your heavy gun batteries, this is going to be a very, very powerful ship. Because just 2 Charlemagne are going to put like battleship level of firepower, and they're going to be very resilient. And just the 3 heavy gun batteries are shooting at full power, with the 4th one, with 4 torpedo turrets also linking, it's going to be a lot. And with protected gun crew, the enemy really needs to take care of them. Otherwise, even if they're crippled, they're still shooting really good. So this is a very good ship now. It does require a little bit of investment. A lonely Charlemagne is not going to be such a good investment compared to other cruisers that we will see very soon. For example, the Chevalier that you see just below. But if you start to have 2 or even 3 of them, then yeah, it becomes really good. Not sure I would give them heat lances. That is an option for sure. But with heavy firepower, you don't need heat lance. Like, you don't need heavy firepower on the heat lances because they have good support values anyway. It's mostly gun batteries that require this. So yeah, more like a normal brawling cruisers that can handle its own very well at point blank thanks to heavy rolling broadside. If you start to pile up 3 of them, the enemy is not gonna laugh at all. And yeah, it's a good frontline unit for the French. Not very resilient, again, be careful with that. But when it gets the line on the enemy, it can punch way above its price. Then we have the Chevalier for 107 points. Normal stat lines: armor 6, citadel 12, 4/4 as a hull points. Normal little cruiser, you would say. It does benefit from the other rules we said, especially coordinated support, which is very good with its torpedo turrets, protected gun crew as well. And yeah, it does just this. It has 2 forward heavy gun batteries that can now link with torpedo turrets, and it's a good ship for 107 points. The price is fair. It will not do anything crazy. You can play it alone, it will be good. You can start to pile 2 or 3 of them and they're gonna be good together. Not as efficient as Charlemagne with heavy firepowers, of course. But yeah, it's just your great bread and butter. Yeah, it is very good. I'm not gonna speak more about the Chevalier, but do not underestimate him. It's not because it has any trick that it cannot work. Just one Chevalier sitting at closing or long range with his gun batteries and torpedoes will do a lot of work. So remember about him. And now, one of the units that got, I think, one of the best boosts that it could dream for is the Écuyère. For the Écuyère, in appearance, not much changed, but 2 things really changed. First of all, it really benefits from coordinated support. Why? Because now these Écuyères that only have gun batteries and cannot change can support units with heat lances, for example. And I'm especially thinking of attaching a unit of Écuyère frigates, which can be attached not only to flagships but to units, to just bring, that's going to be at closing range. These 4 Écuyères that you can bring, that you can attach, will bring 8 dices in support to any attack, and plus 8 dices that could be devastating, for example, with some heat lances. That is really going to make a difference. So they really benefit from coordinated support because you can just basically plug in 8 dices at closing range on any dice pool that you can again, they're just good ships by themselves. They have little picketed broadside, they can help, they boost defense, they can help you for boarding. So you don't just pay 100 points for 8 dice. That could be expensive. They're just also good ships by themselves. They're very cheap at 25 points per model. They also get Corvette Duty, and this is very big as well because now the new rules for attached unit mean that you only gain +1 for having an attached unit, no matter how many units you have. But now it means that each unit within 5 inches of an écuyère will get +1 defense, and that stacks with attached units. So just having 4 écuyères around you will give you +5 to your defense, to your ADV, to your SDV. Plus they will of course help you to defend against, for example, boarding especially, or SRS token. They're just very good support unit. And again, I insist, you can attach them not only on flagships, but also on units, regular units. So, for example, as a list idea, if you want to attach 4 écuyères to an Oriflamme, Richelieu, for example, and you want to attach 4 écuyères to another large unit, for example, a pack of 3 Charlemagne, that absolutely can work, and that could be very efficient as well. Remember that in the right battle fleet, the French frontline battle fleet, you can include multiple units of écuyère frigate in this battle fleet. So yeah, very good unit. I just love those. They're very cute, they're very nice for such small models, and yeah, they can do so much. They do exactly what you want small frigates to do. They escort you good, they boost your attack, and they will defend you against the attacks that you could be weak against. And when you start to board, the +8 dice is in fray. It's nothing to laugh about. And then we got the support stations. Those are, I don't know what to think of them. They seem a little bit fragile for their point cost, but they get you a lot of utility. This is not something that is going to be always extremely efficient because they have some tricks, but they can really help. They have a lot of rules, as you can see. They got advanced repair facilities 1, which means they will roll 3 dice to repair things around. Good to have them around, of course. They have this special rule heavy escort, which is very good to give boosts around. Heavy escort and advanced repair facilities is already a good boost. They get supply depot, and the supply depot rule has been updated. So now you only need to go alongside them. You just need to get within 7 inches, not even to stop within 7 inches or anything, and then your limited weapons that could be out of munition before get their munition again. It's not that important for the French, for the Alliance, but it's more important for other factions. And of course, they got forward deployment and strategic asset. Forward deployment meaning they cannot be in your deployment zone. Like they need to be in the middle of the map and quite far from the enemy's position, but that is already quite good. You want them to be a little bit further because they don't move, so you don't want them to just stand back where you are. And they will give you quite a few things. If they survive until the end of the game, you will get +1 victory points. I don't think this will ever happen. But one final rule, if your enemy destroys it in a boarding action, they gain +1 because they pillage whatever secret document there was there. And that's very cool and fluffy rule, and your enemy can try to play around this. So yeah, that is nice and fun. And your last rule that you get with this Elvas support platform is a useful freight, which means that once per activation, when you activate this, you can have a look at your card, the next card that you would pick, and you can choose, okay, I will put it back where it was, so next card I pick up, it's going to be this, or you can say, no, I don't want this, because it's very useless to me, low value, the victory or valor don't interest me, so you can just put it on the, like, just throw it away, discard it, sorry, don't throw the card. So yeah, it's lots of little utilities, which is very nice, but what makes me afraid is that it is fragile, armor 5, citadel 12, for 68 points it will die very fast, and especially it gives you your opponent a target in the first activations. Usually when you deploy, you try to hide a little bit and to stay out of harm's way, but if you have an Elvas, your enemy can just say, okay, you leave me the initiative because you hold your nerve. Very well, I don't care because I have this Elvas to shoot at. So if you can find it a position quite hidden in the middle of the map behind a big island or something, so your opponent cannot target it, could be worth it. Otherwise, yeah, it's a pricey investment that brings you a lot of utility, but how long will it stay alive is the real question. And the same thing, don't buy it lancets. For the cost, it just gives it an even bigger target on its face. Except in a very specific case, again, when you can hide it in the middle of the terrain behind, indeed behind terrain, you believe that it will survive the first salvo of your opponent, so it can have a very good point-blank attack with one hit lancet supported by gun battery, but it's very like edge case. Don't count on it. I would say keep it cheap and support it. Then you get the Gettysburg Heavy Monitor. It's one of the South American ship, the Sousa ship, that appears with the Columbia Battlefleet that is coming this February. This one, it's just a tough ship. It has quite a good capacity. It has a heavy gun battery to the front, small gun battery to the front, and a small gun battery to the rear. For 120 points, it is tougher than usual because it has 5 hull points, which is more than usual. But for 120 points, you hope that it would get something. It got Minesweeper, which is it's good. It's a good rule. I'm not sure how long it will, how many times it comes into play, but if it does come into play and that your opponent has mines and you can count on the Gettysburg to get it removed, that is good. And the interesting thing compared to the Gettysburg that the Americans can get from the Union is that they can get hit lances, so they can support better, and they also get coordinated support. All in all, I'm not that much of a fan of this one. It is tough, but you don't get that much for 120 points. I'm really not sure I would recommend it, especially since there are other variants that you can get. We will see them very soon. For the Union, it's another matter, because the Union gets special rules, for example, give them hell that can make you want to pile up all the gun batteries that you can take. But for the Alliance, well, if you glued your Union Gettysburg, you can put it on the table. It will not be ridiculous, but it will not be your best. Now we start with some Italian main cruisers. Yeah, the bread and butter cruisers. Mass 2, the Gladius Strike Cruiser. This one scares me. It frightens me. It is very good at what it does. It has it wants to be in the flank because it has 1 heavy gun batteries in the front, 1 heavy gun battery in the rear, and it has a torpedo salvo that shoots only in the front. So it might be tricky to shoot with both heavy gun batteries and with the torpedo salvo. If there is a lot of enemy targets, you might optimize this, otherwise what is interesting with him, apart from the fact that it has ablative flank armor, as we said, and that it is tanky, even tankier, I would say, than the Gettysburg we've seen, because it has Citadel 13, which is important. Quite a few attacks land exactly on this 12 hits statistically for the double point of damage and critical. 13 saves you at least from the critical, and ablative flank armor helps. But what it has especially that is very interesting is Sharpshooter, which is huge. It actually means that attacks with gunnery quality gain -2 to the enemy citadel. That is big. Like, -2 is a big gap. Rail weapons were considered too strong because they were -2 citadel, and now they're only -1, and even on the SLS, depends on what you're shooting, etc. Because -2 citadel is very strong, and the Gladius has it like everywhere. So if you want, you could get to 2 or 3 Gladius, which are priced aggressively at 100 points, and just stay at closing range and do a lot of damage and a lot of criticals. And for 100 points, you have a tanky ship. Just make sure you always show your flank to the enemy, because you gain defensive bonus and you maximize your firepower. Absolutely do that. But if you do, it is a very good ship. Very good ship, nothing to say, except that I want 2 of those, maybe more. Then we go to the Jupiter Support Carrier. It is a carrier, so it has only 3 hull points before it goes cripple. The cool thing about this one is that it's an Italian ship, and Italians are known for their sturdy ships. And even if it is crippled, it still has 3 SRS token, which it's actually good. It's like usually you go from 4 to 2. Going from 4 to 3, it's actually a big deal, especially when you can get crippled that fast. Weapons-wise, It doesn't have that much. It has a pro ram, so if your enemy comes, you can say like, okay, try come and board my aircraft carrier, but I'm gonna ram you anyway. That could be good in defense. A little broadside, okay. It has torpedo salvos, so again a bit weird because you want to show your flank to the enemy, and yet you have your torpedo salvo that goes only to the front. Maybe better to like deploy them on the side of the board, so that you show your flank to most of the enemy and you can just shoot some extreme range torpedoes to whatever goes into your line of fire. That could be a way to play it, or just play it like any carrier and just hide it and play conservatively with it. Not the best carrier of the game, but small support carriers are quite in a rough spot currently. But this one is not a bad one. Keeping 3 SRS token while crippled is a big thing for help. Ablative flank armor helps it, making it tougher. And torpedo salvo, you can play with it so that even if you are very far from the enemy, you can still contribute. So yeah, fine. Like when you compare to other support carriers, it's good. Now we go to the Loire, the fastest ship of the French. It has Minesweeper. Again, it can be useful, especially with the combined with the rule Vanguard, because that means that your Loire will be able to remove mines if they are very, very fast. However, it has only one single heavy gun battery to the front, compared, for example, to a Chevalier, which for 17 more points has 2 of those. Is it worth it? I don't know. I'm not sure. It is more fragile. It has only 3 hull points when it is degraded or crippled, and yeah, it's a tough proposition. You do get Minesweeper and Vanguard, but do you want your very fragile ship to be so fast in front of the enemy? I don't think so. You have other ships that are very good for flanking. We've talked about the Auxilia already. So unless you have a very specific plan for why you want a small surface French cruiser or 2 on the flank on the enemy turn 1, I would say maybe give it a pass. It could be a very good harasser. If you have only one Loire, okay, you can put it on the flank and it's going to be a good harasser. Especially with coordinated support, as we've said before, you can manage to, no matter the angle, you also have a rear gun battery, so you can always manage to do quite some points of damage and be annoying, but it's not going to be your main damage dealer, and it's quite fragile, so it's like not the best harasser either. I would again go with the Italian Auxilia, for example. But if you're making a pure French fleet, having a Loire is not a bad idea. Just don't start to pile them 3 by 3. Then we go to the Pereira War platform, which is 160 points, so we are like way above the price of a very tough cruiser. And it has 12 hull points in total. You can start thinking like, wow, that's a lot. Be careful, it has armor 5. So if it gets focus fired, it will sink like relatively fast. Its weapon system is interesting. It maximizes port side. No, wait, which one is it? No, you can never maximize anything. So yeah, actually, it's not a great fire platform. It has heavy escort, great and strategic asset. We've talked about everything. It can get a shield or shroud or everything for plus 25 points, but it makes it even more expensive. You can make it bristle with weapons, but then it has a huge target on its face, and it will not survive that long. Like, if you're gonna spend, like, I don't know, if you're gonna spend 200-ish points, do you want to put it on the something that has armor 5? Not sure at all. Okay, you can try to indeed make it very, very tanky, and you can give it hit lances, and coordinated support helps it. But wow, like, I think it costs too much. It's just like, it is too fragile for its point cost. It is immobile, so you will not be able to play a lot around this weakness of this fragility. And it's not terrible, so you can try it. Like, I never personally tried it yet, so you can try it and let us know in the comments what you think about it, but doesn't seem that great right now. You can use it as terrain though. It's very nice terrain. Then we have the Picardy Littoral Monitor. This one is more interesting. Like, I can see why you would want it. We don't have a meta, like, we don't have that many submerged unit yet. But this one has Maritime Patrol.
and it has a single heavy gun battery to the front. But between this Maritime Patrol, single heavy gun battery, and 2 torpedo turrets, I'm thinking this one, if you remove the heavy gun battery and replace it with a heavy magnetic bombard, and you just have 1 or 2 Picardy just focusing fire, you can really do a lot of damage on any submarines. Not only submarines, mind you, like if you shoot at something else, like at a normal surface unit, for example, it will still work very well. But this 1 or 2 Picardy in this configuration, they're only 85 points base. So it means they're going to be 90 points each with the heavy magnetic bombard. So 1 or 2 for 90 or 180 points, staying at extreme range, way in the back because they are fragile, so don't expose them. But yeah, 2 of those in extreme range will just pump up shots turn after turn after turn, and they are good support units. They will do damage, especially first they will clean all the submarines of the table, and then like, be careful. Maritime Patrol, you need a SRS token to trigger it, by the way. So you need at least 1 carrier, maybe a support carrier, good for this, to trigger a spotter, and then you can shoot with the Picardy. But yeah, if you do this, like they will clean the submarines, and then they will just help you to focus on whatever surface ship is left. Be careful though that coordinated support does not allow you, for example, to trick and to use torpedoes against aerial units. It doesn't work. You cannot use aerial units against submerged units with coordinated support. By default, you can of course if you use Maritime Patrol, but not by default, and the vice versa. Submerged, like torpedo units, submerged unit cannot aim at aerial with coordinated support. So be mindful of that. Apart from this, very good artillery ship. I like it very, very much. Then we have an Italian ship, a small one, like a Monitor class, small mass 2, the Pilum Monitor. This one has the same kind of problem that I saw with the Loire, for example, in the sense that, okay, it is cheap, it is cheaper even, it has hammer sweep, but it doesn't have vanguard, and it has minesweeper. It seems to be made for flanking, which seems fine, but it is Citadel 13 but only 3 hull points while crippled, so you're like, and if it is crippled anyway, it doesn't get to shoot at full capacity because it doesn't have predicted gun crew, so you're like, okay, it can die fast, it has minesweeper, it is cheap-ish, it does have a forward like heavy gun battery and torpedo salvo, so you're like, yeah, can help, and program, so if you get in range, you will do damage. But then again, I'm like, it's a tough proposition because you need to be careful with those. They are not ships that you can put in the middle of the table and be like, okay, they're gonna do their job. No, if they get too much attention on them, they will die. Same as the Loire, one Pilum, just one Pilum will be good as a flanker because it will shoot its heavy gun batteries and its torpedo salvo, and then it can try to get an angle to make a ramming attack with hammer sweep. It could be a very devastating ramming attack. But yeah, if you start to have 2 Pilum, yes, it's still relatively cheap, but since they will be able to link their heavy gun batteries and their torpedo salvo, that's how I see it, since they will be able to link, they will be able to do lots of damage, they will start to put criticals left and right, and they will get attention, and they cannot survive this attention. And that's what I have to say about them. If you put 2 or 3 of them, they can do some work, same as the Loire, but they will die fast. And if you play them single, they're good arresting unit. So fairly priced, like I would say at 85, it's with all of this program, torpedo salvo, heavy gun battery. I'm like, it works, especially with coordinated support. Once again. Okay, next we have the Providence Merchantman. It's one of the Confederate ship for South America, for Sousa. This one I like. It's like an attached unit for only 62 points, and I like small attached unit. It has 2 small gun batteries with coordinated support. It can pile up actually. It is kind of like if you do manage to shoot right and with a paddle wheel. Usually you can with counter rotation. It is 2 gun batteries in support. Let's remember coordinated support, so that can give you plus 4 dice already for 62 points. Plus it's an attached unit, so it gives you a little bit more defense, and it has useful freight, which allows you again to check the next card and see if you want to keep it or not. I like it. It's relatively tough. Like for 62 points, it has armor 6 at L12. 4 hull points in battle ready and 4 in cripple, so it's not going down like this, especially with the armor 6. And it is cheap, and if you really want, you could give it a hit lancet, but you don't really need, you more want the Providence to be supporting. And yeah, a good little ship. I would recommend getting at least one. Not mandatory in any mean, but if you have the box, good ship. Then we go to the Pugio destroyer, which is a mass 1 for the Italian. That is has a little bit more punch. Think of it more like the Excalibur for the crown. And this one is interesting. It has auxiliary mine layer, so you can start to put mines left and right. Only 1 mine per unit, not per model. Still good. We don't say no to this. It has 2 gun batteries per ship, which is fine, but it does not get what the crown had, which was a torpedo salvo. And it only has a light broadside. And this is the part where I'm starting to think, like 39 points per ship. You can get up to 6, but yes, you do have coordinated support, which you don't really need actually of this one. Yes, you can pile up a lot of gun batteries, but that's it. You will not have torpedoes, you will not have a strong broadside. You do have Pack Hunter, which can give you all the way up to +6 dices. So you can do very strong torpedo, sorry, not torpedo, very strong gun battery attack. But yeah, that's all you're gonna do. And at about 40 per unit, it's gonna be 240 points for a whole squadron of Citadel 12 ships, mass 1, so they can be just insta-killed if you breach their Citadel. I'm not sure. Having just a squadron of 2 or 3 to get a little mine and making a little, again, like not even a harassment unit, but a little unit accompanying your main fleet and just giving like 6 gun batteries once in a while could work, especially with Pack Hunter. It's fine. I would not say over-invest on them, and I wouldn't say just take 2 of those either, because then you have 2 fragile units, and if they die, it's like 1 victory point for the enemy, because it's a squadron. So, I'm not sure to play. 3 or 4 models might be the ideal number that allows them to not be such a big priority target that they will get focused and killed, and they are easier to pilot. And they are still not that weak, so they will just die to the first heavy gun battery and give victory points to the opponent. It seems fine, a bit weak for its point cost, but definitely playable. If you get a few of those, they will do their job. Now we start to have a look at the more interesting ships from the Sousa, the Saratoga Littoral Cruiser. And this is a cruiser that has some rules that are not useful yet. For example, coastal bombardment, that allows you to reroll blanks at ground units, which do not exist yet. We don't even know the rules yet for this. So the Saratoga might be invaluable later on. We will see. And for now, it just has a forward heavy gun battery plus gun battery. Good. For 111 points. Can link it good, and it has especially Terminator Assault, so it has these little helicopters in the back that it can send 20 inches as a special operation, and each Terminator Assault, each Saratoga can give 10 SRS token. That is good, that is very good, and if I'm not mistaken, there is written somewhere that you cannot intercept those things. They ignore controls. No, they can be intercepted. Okay, so they might... okay. They do need some escort, actually, the Saratoga, that might have been removed from the previous OrBat. So be careful with that. You do need some aircraft to take the heat for them. But yeah, like just 2 Saratogas, it's gonna be, if they're supported 20 dices in assault, there is a serious chance to make a catastrophic explosion, like to make a carnage, or even worse. Like you can really target some tough ships with that. Plus, if you have 2 Saratoga, you can link all these heavy and small gun batteries that are conveniently all pointed to the front and do quite some damage. And that's not even counting the coastal bombardment roll. So for 111 points for a ship with a 5 hull point before it gets crippled, I would say like it's good. It's good between the easy to pilot and the aircraft that it can send. That is probably how I'm going to build mine when I receive them. And now we go to a very interesting artillery cruiser. Many factions have those. We've seen them with the Augustus, of course, for the Imperium, the Washington for the Union, etc., etc. This is a good artillery ship. The Rostratum Naval Ballista is a 12.6 gun, and the Scorpio has other things. It has a small gun battery in there that can be used to support when the enemy gets a little bit too close. You can especially swap it to a rocket battery to support even better. You have torpedo salvos that again can help to even amplify with coordinated support the firepower of your naval ballista, and it obviously has spotter as an artillery cruiser, which would allow you to either reroll blanks or you remove all the benefit of being obscure to the opponent. This is already quite good, and on top of all of that, like, it is relatively resilient for an artillery cruiser. It costs 130, which is on the average price for an artillery cruiser when you compare to others. And yeah, just like it. You can keep it in the rear. Coordinated support with its gun battery and torpedo salvo means that if you really want, you can make one big attack. Let's remember that the naval ballista can trigger a valor effect to do something very, very interesting with positioning your enemy's ship where you want them to be. So even just one is going to be useful. Of course, 3 Scorpios are going to be a big target, but they're going to do such tremendous work that they're really, really worth it, I would say. But I would say at least 2 of those are, if you can find the points, they're going to be great. 3, it might start to be overkill. 3 Scorpios might like one-shot a very large flagship of your opponent every turn. So that might start to be annoying to play against. But yeah, just very good ships all around. We don't play to make our opponent be happy that his flagship survived so long, so do get 2 or 3 of those and just have fun. Then we have the Speta attack cruisers, which are the heaviest version of the attack cruisers of the Italians. Those, as you can see, they have a lot of weapons. They have, of course, frontal gun battery, smaller gun battery, torpedo salvo, rear heavy gun battery, pile, and it has heavy broadsides. So this thing, and ablative flank armor. So this Spatha, it's 130 points, same price as the Charlemagne, does not have heavy firepower, so a little bit different use, but this you can buy one of them and it's gonna do a lot of work on its own compared to the Charlemagne. You do get diminishing returns from starting to pile more and more and more because it has focused gunnery, which may mean that if you shoot just one of them with heavy gun battery plus 1 in support plus a second small gun battery, it's already going to be something like 15, 16-ish, 15 dices. That is already very good. We're rolling blanks. You're putting criticals on a lot of targets. And even if you're just pointing forward, you can link with the torpedoes with the coordinated support, and it's already going to be good. That is a very good ship, and it has a hammer sweep, of course. Just a good combat ship. That, unlike the Charlemagne, where we said that you need at least 2 of those to get the most value out of it, Spartha are the only can be played on their own. They're very good 2 of those. 3 might start to be overkill. So yeah, don't overinvest in those. But yeah, if you go on the flank between the 2 heavy gun batteries, small gun battery, and the heavy broadside, I mean, there's not much that can take all of this and just sneeze through. Now we go to the Springfield corvette, which, little disclaimer, I'm not a huge fan of the model. I know some people like this very old steamship appearance, but I don't like the big wheel in the middle, but just model criticize. Otherwise, it's a very, very good unit. Basically, everything we said about the Écuyère for the French applies for the Springfield. It does go very good to have a 25 points gun battery attached to anything. This can only be attached to a Sousa flagship. So for example, the Virginia that we've seen, or the Columbia, they go with it, and they go very well with it. We were talking about this build of the Columbia in the beginning of the video, where we said that a Columbia with 4 escorts and a shroud generator is just such a pain to remove. Well, put on top 4 Springfield corvette on it, and it's just a nightmare. This thing has like it's gonna be plus 12 to its defense against boarding, torpedoes, aerial, because of the rule corvette duty. It's insane. It's insane. And yeah, it's overall everything we said about the corvette is about the Écuyère. Sorry, is the same for the Springfield corvette, except the Écuyère is a better model. Fight me. If you buy a Columbia, you will have Springfield corvettes, and absolutely play them. They pair very, very, very well with Columbia. I would even go as far as saying, if you put a Columbia on the table, you buy them the Springfield Escort as an upgrade, and it's 100% worth it. Plus, it's gonna be looking cool. Plus, give him the Escort. They're also in the box, and it's gonna be such a cool unit to activate. All these little tokens and Corvette and Escorts and the big battleship in the middle. It's too good not to do this. So, do it. Then we go to the Sumter. Sure how to pronounce this. Sumter. This one is also probably gonna be really good, but one thing, it's a landing vessel, and for now we don't have any rule for landing vessels and ground combat yet at the moment of this video. So depending on what the rules actually are, it could be invaluable to have a relatively tough Mass 2 cruiser that can get the objective. It has virtually no weapon. It has a small gun battery and broadside, but it has the helicopter for the Terminator assault, which is good. But apart from this, it doesn't do much except being able to just go on a beach and drop your tanks, which is good. We don't say that it's bad, but for now we don't know how valuable it's gonna be. As a combat ship, for sure it's not valuable. If you want to just build a Saratoga that will have the heavy gun battery instead, and it's gonna be much better. But if you want to spam Terminator assaults, it could also be a good carrier for that, but I would not recommend it. For sure, if you can, magnetize the Saratoga and the Sumter, and all the turrets as usual, but so you can switch from one to the other, because if you want to play Saratoga now, probably you might want to play Sumter later, so being able to switch from one to the other is going to be important. Then we have the smallest platform, the Vasco Battle Platform, a Mass 2 that is also very fragile, 55 points, armor 5, 6 hull points in total. It can be attached to a larger station, and it has heavy escort, so it can be a good boost if you really want to make this big war platform that is Mass 3. You can boost it with this. Other than that, not much to say. It's like a single heavy gun battery with heavy escort, strategic asset, 55 points for a heavy gun battery. It starts to be at the point where you might want to consider it. Maybe you don't want to overinvest later, but being attached to a larger platform, it can contribute. And even just like this, hidden, a single heavy gun battery can be annoying. For 55 points, just make sure it doesn't get boarded in the sense that it would give victory points to your opponent. But if you find yourself with about 50 points in your list extra and you don't know what to build and what to put in your list, a Vasco could be a fine investment. Now, if you have not 55 points but 75 points in your list, I would absolutely recommend instead to get the Vulcan repair ship. The Vulcan is a good ship, basically. It has torpedo salvo, so it will contribute to the Italian flagship that it is attached to. Probably it wants to be attached to a carrier, so mostly the Minerva, so it can repair the Minerva and remove disorder tokens, etc. Because, as you might remember, aircraft carriers that are in the black level of disorder cannot launch SRS tokens anymore, so it's better to be able to if you're a carrier. But it goes also good with the Mars, and it will be able to repair it. 75 points for torpedo salvo and advanced repair facility 2, and being attached to it, so you can link your broadsides and you boost yourself the defense, etc. I would say it's worth it. Maybe I value too much advanced repair facility. Just being able to repair in a bubble around you with 4 dices, I would say it's good. And we finished with the surface units. We are now going to have a look at the skimming units, and all of them are French. We start with a new unit that is not released yet, which is the Alma Levant support cruiser. This one can be attached. It's one of the few Levant that can be attached, and it is good. It has heavy escort, so it gives a +2 to the defense in a bubble around himself, in addition to the bonus of being an attached unit. That is good because, as we will see, the Furieux that used to have this rule has been reduced to only +1. So it's now a very good escort. It has a forward-facing rocket battery and heavy rocket battery that can be replaced if you want, but since you will probably attach the Alma, maybe it's better just to keep it on the cheap and just use the rockets to support. Anyway, they will take the qualities of the weapon that they are supporting. They get mine layer, which is good. You don't want to make a squadron of like 3 Alma to get 3 mine, but just a single Alma will give you a mine that is good. Let's take it. And again, it is advanced repair facility too, which is very important. The Alma might want, in this sense, more to be attached to a Saint-Michel, for example, or especially a Vauban. That's how I see it. A Vauban that has forward-facing hit lances and that might want to support them at long range, for example, with some rocket batteries, just saying, could really want to have this Alma to repair himself, first of all, to get more defense with heavy escort, second of all, and to just to make sure that it can keep sending its SRS token by being repaired, like third of all. And just like, yeah, those 3 things, like the support heavy rocket batteries at long range, which is really important for the heat lances because they don't shoot so good at long range, but if they're supported by enough torpedoes and rockets, they can really start to give the pain at long range as well. And yeah, just a good package for 107 points. It is expensive, yes. It is only 3 hull points before it degrades, yes, as well. But if you have a Vauban, maybe try to hide behind it. So, I don't know, it's an aerial unit, you will be visible anyway. No, it's skimming, stupid. It's skimming, so try to hide the Alma because it will get targeted fast. But yeah, just overall a good unit, just fragile. Keep it just with an angle on the unit that you want to support with, and keep it alive. Now we go to the Chasseur. The Chasseur got a point reduction, the same as the Alma, by the way. I didn't talk that much about previous units. They got points changed because it was units that were not released yet. But the Chasseur was released. It was 130 points, and it is now 127. Small points reduction, but again, it's a ship that really benefits from coordinated support. I think every ship benefits from it, let's be honest. But yeah, it has a heavy rocket battery, and yeah, for example, you can keep the heavy rocket and have a good rolling ship, or you can be a little bit naughtier and replace the heavy rocket battery with a heat lance, and it's gonna make plus 8 points, but then you have a very good ship that at closing range, with all the gun battery supporting, will do a lot of damage, and even at point blank, thanks to the heat lance, it's still getting some support. It is a good combat ship, so relatively fragile. It can get focus fire fast, like all the Levant that we will see. All of them like very much to be in strategic reserve. Like, you need to have a very solid plan to not be in strategic reserve, or to be a Vauban and have a fleet around it. But apart from this, the Chasseur, for example, I really don't see them not being in reserve, because they really don't want to be facing the enemy's firepower. They want to go in the rear, where they can use their agility to stay behind the enemy lines and optimize their firepower. They also get a little defensive bonus with Levant Surge, which reduces the firepower of enemy submerged attack. Still good and fluffy. Then we have the Dieppe, which is the new name for the Solex cruiser, which is the ship that gives its like the benefit from the Solex generator to every ship 10 inches around, to ships that are mass 2 or more. So, for example, the Honor destroyer, which can have, for example, heat lancets, will not benefit from the Dieppe. So a little bit annoying, but that's how it is. It has a forward-facing heat lance, a rear-facing heat lancet, and a thermal cluster bomb. So what this tells us, it tells us that this is a ship that wants to fly over enemy units. It can shoot its big heat lance to the front, and it's always good to have a big heat lance to the front. And to the rear, you can link your heat lancet and your thermal cluster bombs together to make one big attack to the rear. On top of, you can also try, of course, to use a Valor effect to give another heat lancet to shoot. And the main benefit of the Dieppe, obviously, is to give the Solex generator in a bubble around you. You need to think, though, is it worth it? Like, it is a ship that does not have that crazy firepower. It's fine for the present cost, and you need to think, like, does getting sustained on all my heat lances and heat lancets worth getting a Dieppe? Or why shouldn't I just take another ship with a lot more weaponry? Is it worth it? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. They're already devastating. If you have some command or overrides for this Alpha Strike that you really want, might be worth might be not actually, but we'll need to see also how cool is the model, because it's absolutely something to take into consideration. But yeah, if you have only like a single chasseur going, or even a single magenta going behind enemy lines, maybe it's not worth it to accompany it with a Diep. Now if you start to have 3, 4, 5 Mass 2 and 3 Levant ships, and Sirene as well. No, Sirene doesn't work. But yeah, a lot of Mass 2 ships going behind enemy lines, adding another Diep to support them is worth it, yes. Then the Furieux, the good old Furieux that got actually a point reduction, -1 point, wow, but it got a lot of good things. It got a nerf. It doesn't have heavy escort anymore, it has corvette duty, so only +1 to defense around. Okay. We will stop repeating that it benefits from coordinated support, but yeah, as a flagship for French skimming unit, for example, a Magenta, it is very good. You don't need to buy all the heat lances and heat lancets anymore. You can just keep all the weapons that it has and just use this pool of dices as a support for the Magenta that it can be attached to. You can also, again, buy a Solex generator internal on the Magenta, and the Magenta will benefit from the dice pool of the Furieux. We said it about the Magenta already. Not a necessity, but absolutely can work, especially if you have a Furieux. And yeah, just a good ship, 134 points. In this idea that you use it as an escort, it's good. It also has a little boost with Legionnaire assault pods, which, first of all, it's such cool capacity, and second of all, now you ignore counter assault, which is logical and fluffy. I mean, how do you counter assault this? And second of all, like it makes it more tempting. It has freight 12 without anything except Hazardous, but you need to win anyway. But at least it means that you always want to at least try to make a boarding action without fearing for your ship. So quite good. And also a rule that is very cool is landing vessel, which means that you will have some ground token that you can deploy from the Furieux, and it will be such a pleasure to just fly over an island with your skimming Furieux and just start throwing drop pods and putting your little tokens of ground troops. How cool is that? I mean, how can you fight against that? So I really love this model. It's a gorgeous model, cool, very cool fluff, very cool rules, and it's just efficient. So having one Furieux is never a bad call, and if you have two, it's good as well. I really like this model, and I will recommend whether you get the Magenta Battlefleet or the Alliance starter, I would say do at least one Furieux. You will not regret it. Then you have one of the unit that is not released yet, the Gascony Levant Merchantman. This one is not an attached unit, and it's more like a support Levant ship. It is expensive at 100 points, in the sense that if it only does support, you're like, do I really want to pay this price? It is a supply depot, which is not its best rule, but it's still good if you have some weapons that are limited. It has mine layer, again, something that is fine, and the best rule that it has is logistical support. It gives you +1 card. Be careful if you already have another ship that has this rule, logistical support, that it does not stack, it will be too strong. But if you don't have other sources of logistical support in your ship, in your fleet, having one Gascony Merchantman is worth it, even just for logistical support. And then you get a mine, and then you get some rocket batteries. Be careful not to expose your Gascony because it's going to be a big target. And you get supply depot, so it is good. It is good. Keep it hidden, keep it in the back of your fleet, and it will just give you more and more cards over the course of the game, which is significant advantage. And of course, don't put this guy in the in strategic reserve. It wants to be in the back of your own deployment zone, not next to the enemy. So yeah, be very careful about that. Now we have the Honor Levant destroyers, which are very interesting ships. Someone did the statistic on them, and they seem to be very, very efficient points per damage ratio. Do notice that they do cost a lot. They're 42 points per model for something that is armor 5, 3 hull points, level 12. So if they get shot at, they will die fast. You really, really want, I think, to put them in strategic reserves. We have a little bit debate, saying like, yeah, they're small, they can hide behind terrain. Yes, depends how much terrain you have. But if you're not sure you're going to a tournament, plan on having them in strategic reserve. And anyway, strategic reserve, it's something that you may choose to do. So remember, if you go to a tournament, you can put them in a Levant Battlefleet, for example, or Alliance Faction Battlefleet, and match per match, you can say, okay, here they're going to be in reserve, here they're not going to be in reserve, their whole Battlefleet. So something you keep in mind. That being said, they have Minesweeper, which is good for them, especially if they start not in reserve. They have 2 gun batteries, forward facing, so I'm really looking forward for the miniature. Picket broadside, okay. And you can have up to 6 Honneur Levant, and this is when it starts to be powerful. You can buy, for example, a hit lancet on one of them, for 2 of them, and you can have them popping somewhere, shoot the hit lancet at closing, which is the maximum they can shoot, the hit lancet, they cannot shoot that long. They will not have a lot of dices, these little hit lancets, but they're still going to be devastating. And with coordinated support, all the other gun batteries that you have in your unit will support. So that's going to be 4 dices per Honor Destroyer, which means that like you will have a lot of dices for relatively cheap, and of course spread them out so they don't get caught in a blast. But yeah, this could be very, very, very powerful unit that comes on the side, either through a strategic reserve, either by hiding behind terrain. But for larger units, it's harder to hide them. And yeah, this is a very good damage dealer. Again, not tanky for the point cost, but it's skimming, so it can hide and just make a Levant surge at the last moment, flying over the island in movement, etc. So they need a little bit of to be subtle, to be used efficiently. But if they work, just in 1 turn, they can probably get their point cost back, and in 2 turns for sure. And their objective is to be big annoyances in the rear of the enemy. And finally, we have the Marseille. The Marseille was the old name of the Solex cruiser. Now it's the Marseille Levant bomber carrier. And this is very similar to the Volière that we'll see very shortly. But this one sends Frelon bombers and not classic Malinois SRS tokens. For 134 points, I'm usually not a big fan of support carriers. They are expensive for what they do. It has forward-facing heavy rocket and rocket. Fine, but it cannot be attached, and on its own it's nothing to write home about. If the enemy gets close to you, you can fly over him and throw a thermal cluster bomb. Fun, but not sure that you will survive past that, and not sure you will one-shot anybody with a single thermal cluster bomb. But the main deal is that you have 3 Frelon bombers, which can be the difference between an attack losing some SRS token and not gaining the all important devastating, and actually keeping it. So this Marseille, I see it either in complement of the Vauban, because the Vauban already sends 4 Frelons. This would allow you to send 7 Frelons. And let's remember that each Frelon gives 5 action dices, which is a lot. And if you do manage to overrun the size of your opponent's mass, then it gets devastating. And this is already a good thing, because it means with 1 Vauban and 1 Marseille, it would be 7 Frelons, and of course you put them SRS token to defend them, obviously. It means that you could, even an Ice Maiden, you would be beyond the mass and you would gain devastating. So that is the little combo I would see. 7 tokens would basically guarantee that you get devastating between the Vauban and the Marseille, or you don't have the points to have a Vauban, for example, and then you just use the Marseille to obliterate mass 2 cruiser every turn with a 3 Frelon and some SRS token as an escort. But in this sense, it's not that efficient. You can of course take 2 Marseille and then a Volière, for example, or Minerva, etc., to cover the bombers on their approach, but it starts to be a lot of points on the very fragile ships. So I'm like, it can work, but it's not the best use, I would say. I would really say the best use is to combine it with a Vauban, so you can target mass 4, 5, 6 ships and with a Frelon, and make sure that you get devastating on them. And then if they have 7 Frelon bombers and some SRS token escorting them, you will, even the Suleiman is not gonna laugh about it. Well, the Suleiman cannot get catastrophic explosion, so not a good example, but even Victory, carrier of the British, is not gonna laugh at all, or the Ice Maiden, for example, or for the double score Anastasia of the Commonwealth. Nobody's laughing at that, like, at all. And then the SRS part of it, the Volière, classic good old Volière. I say good old, but it's not that good actually, but it it actually got a point increase from 120 to 134, making it more in line with the other carriers. I'm not sure why, like, it didn't deserve it. It was already not good, and now it's even worse. It has terrible firepower, like 2 gun batteries, yay. It is very fragile. It has Citadel 11, 3 whole points before you lose half of your SRS token. It's very hard to hide behind terrain, because the miniature is like on a base, and it's quite big. So it's not like the small carriers like the Pravda or the Rano you can try to hide. No, this one is just going to be flying around on like the miniature itself, and it's very hard to not have a line of sight on it, and it gets focused down very fast. Like, I don't want to sound too bad, but if the enemy points 2 or 3 heavy gun batteries on it, it's crippled. That's it, and then it loses so much efficiency that it could be almost be not there. It could be the same. It is agile like all the Levant. It has a little bonus against submerged attacks. Yay. I'm really not a huge fan of the Volière. You have better ways in the fleet right now to have SRS token. If you have a Volière and you really want to play it very conservatively. Go from island to island and hide it very well, the best you can, because 4 SRS token is not that bad. But yeah, consider that if the enemy can start to point like even 1 Mass 2 cruiser on it, you can start to think like, oh my god, it's gonna be crippled. So not that great. It's a nice model, but for now, if you have the choice, if you can magnetize, always a good option to have a Volière later, but for now it's too expensive for what it does. Now we go to the submerged units, and they are not only French units, unlike the skimming part. But we start with the French submarine though, with the Épaulard artillery submarine. It used to be the best version of the submarines before, because the Alliance had no access to strategic reserve. It might not be true anymore, especially now that it has the nerf of spotter, meaning that if you do trigger spotter, you need to choose between removing obscured or rerolling blanks. You don't get both. The magnetic bombard is still a fine weapon, but the Épaulard is extremely fragile. Okay, it is submerged, so it is obscured many times, but it is armor 4, Citadel 10. This thing just dies a lot of times when you start to shoot at it. And it is expensive, 37 points. Its main defense is that it is submerged, but don't count on that, and that it is extreme range, so it can be out of range, but even torpedoes are quite efficient against him. Yes, it has SDV 3, but it's not gonna save him every time. A pack of 2 or a pack of 4 could work as a cheapish activation for 2, or a nice harassment unit if you put 4 of those, and putting navigation lock somewhere can work, but is it really worth it? I don't know. If you have 2 Épaulard in the rear for a cheap activation, 2 or 3 can work, but be careful because they die really fast, especially to torpedoes, which are their big hunters. Then we got the Sagitta hunter submarines for the Italians, and this is like a nice little Italian. It's kind of like an equivalent of the Orcas, for example, for the Crown, or the Piranhas for the Commonwealth, and they cost 40 points, but they have a real torpedo salvo, like a full torpedo salvo, which is good for 40 points, nothing to write home about, but they do also put a mine. Okay, good. And they do get pack hunter, which means that when you start to have a pack of 4 Sagittas, they start to tickle, indeed, quite a lot. But same problem as the Épaulard, exactly the same, armor 4, Citadel 10, 3 hull points. They will die fast, exactly the same issue. They're even a little bit more expensive because they have a little bit more firepower, and they have auxiliary mine layer, and they're not dependent on spotter to get good damage boost, but they're fine for their point cost. They're not the unit I would be most excited about, but for 80 points, 2 of those 120 for 3 of those can be a good price. Would have been interesting if they could be attached, kind of like the orcas or the piranhas, but they're not. Eh, tant pis. They are still fine ships. Don't rely too much on them, but as a small cheap activation that can do its work at extreme range, it is good. And then finally we go to the Sirene attack submarine, which is the last submerged unit, which used to be quite bad because it has the same problem. It is very fragile. Armor 4, Citadel 10, 3 hull points, and Vanguard, yay. it died all the time before it could reach its target. Like, okay, you could hide it, but at some point it would just get obliterated very fast before it could be at point blank. Now though, it can fit into an Alliance Levant battle fleet, and this means that this little guy with its lancet will be able to go at point blank, and the enemy has very little to counter it. You can put 4 Sirens for 40 points each, so 160 points, and just have them pop on the side where the enemy is weak, and just obliterate something, like obliterate a support carrier, or even a cruiser, an artillery cruiser or something. Be careful that they will die very fast to their retaliation. When they arrive from the board, make sure you spread them out so they can cover themselves, but don't suffer from a blast or something like this. They will die quite fast, but if you can manage to make them arrive at the end of turn 2, they sink something, and then on turn 3 you do manage to activate them again, and they probably will have something else after they move, but they're quite fast to have again target at point blank, then they for sure paid for themselves. Single activation at the end of turn 2 is fair, it's a nice trade. If you do manage to activate them a second time, then they pay for themselves like way enough. So yeah, that's how I would play them. You can also try to hide them or something, but they will just die to the slightest SRS that looks in their direction. So yeah, not very great. And the last unit, but certainly not least, is the Cordoba. It's changed the name, it was Cordova, now it's Cordoba. I'm not sure what it means actually, but probably it was a little correction. Which is the Spanish Aerogalon, Galeon, which is, first of all, the concept is very cool, and the model looks amazing. I cannot wait to have this. It looks straight from this old game like Kingdom Under Fire, and I just love it. It has Flag Barrage 10 for 125 points, very good. Cloud Hunting, so it's just like shooting down enemy aircraft left and right. It is a dirigible construction, so it is more vulnerable to getting magazine explosion, but this is not something your opponent can trigger, so it's more like when you don't have good luck, well, sucks. But other than that, it's an aerial unit, so it gets a little bit more protection from there. It is a little bit fragile for 125 points, only 7 hull points in total. But again, it is aerial, so try to really stay away from the opponent. And as you can guess from the list, it is made for hunting other aerial units. The Alliance doesn't have aerial units like at all except this one, and this makes sure that you can have like a 2 or 3 of those. It will, first of all, if you pack 3 Aerogalon, it's gonna be Flag Barrage 30, which is like, it's just gonna be fun. Statistically, you remove like 5 SRS token, but just throwing 30 dice as before interception is just very very cool. And 5 of those are going to just obliterate a lot of enemy aircraft units. If you play a mirror match and there is a Vauban in front, or there is an Avalon Sky Fortress from the Crown, or the Prince Eugen of the Imperium, like those guys are really not gonna enjoy being targeted by those. You could even, if you have the least building flexibility to do it, actually play them in separate activations, because this way you get most out of a cloud hunting. So you can shoot each time like heavy gun batteries, linking with the gun batteries, and with aerial torpedo salvos. If you are in good range, you can actually link all of those with coordinated support. I promise it's the last time we say that this unit benefits from it. But yeah, you can really just link everything together and just make a lot of damage. That's going to be it. We are at the end of the OrBat. We can just have a quick look at what the units are, because this is brand new for the Alliance OrBat. We now have this little unit identification guide to see which one is which. So this Columbia, the one that is very tough, that is coming, the Mars that looks like an old trireme, and the beautiful Magenta, etc. We can have a little teaser of the units. so you can just compare them next to each other. I'm very happy for the alliance that they have very distinctive appearance. For example, the French are very like sleek and very like they look like beautiful pieces of engineering. Like look at this Fury, I mean I just love it. While the Union ships look much older and tougher and almost dwarven ships, like very bulky, very tough, and with these dawn wheels, they look very tough. And then we have the Italian ships that look like these Roman Empire triremes. And yeah, it's gonna be very nice. If you do paint them all of the same color, they're still gonna look like a cohesive mix. For example, the French and the Italians each have these little embellishments on the side, trimmings, I guess, like this little thing. I'm not sure what is the exact word, but yeah, these look very good. And if you make them the same color, it's gonna look great. Or, and one of our player plans to do that, you can have the friendship all of one color, the Sousa all of another color, select bright colors, for example, and they will really look like an alliance of different nations, different people just coming together to face the larger powers of the world, which is what the fluff of the alliance is all about. And yeah, that is going to be it. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, remember to give us a thumbs up. Let us know in the comment if you did enjoy, and I'm also curious to know like which faction do you like, sub-faction of the alliance do you plan to play? Are you very excited for the Italians and you're gonna make a very strong Italian force, or do you plan to stay like pure French with Surface and Levant ships, especially the Vauban that is coming? Or do you plan to make a little bit of everything? Do you plan to get the Sousa ships, or you want to do only Franco-Italian? Let us know in the comment, and until the next video, remember to keep spreading the love all around you. Bye!